From Unity Church of Christianity in Houston, Texas, this is The Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational Christian church providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress with the Reverend Howard Caesar.
There was a man who walked into the produce section of his local supermarket, and he asked to buy half a head of lettuce. And the boy clerk that was working that department told him that they only sold whole heads of lettuce. But the man was insistent and asked the boy to go ask his manager if he could sell him a half a head of lettuce. So the boy walked into the back room and up to his manager and said to him, "Some goofball wants to buy a half a head of lettuce." And as he finished saying that sentence, he kind of caught and turned and realized the man was standing right behind him. So he immediately added, "And this gentleman kindly offered to buy the other half." So the manager approved the deal, and the man went on his way, happy. And later, the manager called the boy in and said, "You know, I was impressed with the way you got yourself out of that situation earlier. I really like people who are able to think on their feet. Where are you from, son?" And he said, "Canada, sir." And he said, "Well, why did you leave Canada?" And the boy said, "Sir, there's nothing but prostitutes and hockey players up there." He said, "Oh, really? My wife's from Canada." And he said, "No kidding. What team does she play for?" You heard it here. So, okay, we have to watch what we say and where we say it, don't we? Mankind can be defined as the speaking species. The speaking species. We are users of words, and we are creators of words, and we are the communicators of words, and they are the vehicle and vehicles of ideas. We think and we speak with words. And quite often I think people forget really the power that exists in the spoken word, spiritually and creatively, with the use of words. And in Unity, one of our very basic and fundamental teachings really is the power of the spoken word, and the power of affirmations, and the power of affirmative prayer. It's very, very important. And we think and speak in terms of words, and both are creative, and with them we create good or ill, depending on how we want to direct them. And that good or ill really affects our bodies as we're thinking and speaking, and it affects our circumstances, because at all times we are creating our reality. And so with the power of the spoken word, we are always, in a sense, amplifying energies and moving energies that can be directed towards greater health or greater prosperity and abundance, or our relationships, toward being a more loving being, towards any aspect of life, really. Or it can be affirmed and directed toward the opposites of all of these things as well. Today we want to really try and heighten our awareness and bring even greater importance, or renew the importance in our minds of the power of the spoken word and what it is that we're doing. We want to really remember to speak up, and I don't mean louder, I mean directionally, to speak up in terms of the direction of a higher consciousness, to purify what it is that's moving through us at all times and become conscious of that. Because we really have we're gifted. We've been gifted with a voice. It is our instrument, really. And we create all kinds of sounds that come through that voice, really. We can weep, and we can groan, and we can grunt, and we can sigh, and we can sing, we can laugh, we can criticize, or we can compliment, we can praise, or we can diminish. We can formulate, and communicate ideas as we bring words together, either using them constructively or destructively, really. So there is an energy that is always passing through us and moving through us. And we can be in the silence of our own mind having a conversation, but oftentimes these thoughts find their way into an energy of expression through voice. And it's important to know and understand that there is significance to that. It was important enough that the writer of the book of Proverbs stated in his writings, he said, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue." Death and life are in the power of the tongue. The spoken word, as I say, adds these energies, adds vibrations, the frequencies of sound to our thoughts, and it's an added dimension, actually. So as we have a thought and we bring it into expression and put sound around it and words and so forth, it's just another dimension of a frequency and vibration in life. And we know the body responds to sound, If I asked you to imagine that I had a blackboard here and I was now about to scrape my fingernails down that blackboard, it would not create a pleasant feeling, would it? If you heard that. You hear it? Okay. Now, it's just a sound. It's just a sound. And in this case, you're only imagining it, and some of you are feeling the unpleasantness of it. Okay? It's in your memory bank, but it still creates an unpleasant feeling. And at the same time, if I said, okay, just think of a piece of music, a symphony, or something that you use as music to just calm you and relax you, whatever your favorite might be. I really love Enya as one of those pieces of music. But just think about that and the different energy that you feel as you think about that piece of music that you perhaps have familiarity with. There are sounds that are all around us all the time, and these sounds are vibrations, and we receive them in through our ears, but mostly so that we can transfer the sounds then to our brains where they are decoded, and there we know if the sound was a dog barking or a car door slamming, or if it was some group of words that were put together in some kind of a message that we needed to hear or something we needed to learn or whatever. And so it's true that our ears are receiving sound, but we must not forget that our whole body is actually vibrating and receiving and being penetrated with sound vibrations. And that isn't anything new, because even spiritually, it is anciently known that chanting has been practiced for thousands of years, and sacred sounds have been stated. And of course, we know the Om is the most sacred and pure sound there is. And for people to say the Om actually resonating through your being takes them into oftentimes a very spiritual place. And so there's a lot of science behind some of these things. And so it's important that we realize that we've been given a tremendous gift and a powerful tool and a wonderful instrument. And it is basically our voice. You see, it's a gift from God. This voice that we have, and how we use it is important. It's not just a voice, Some people think of it, it's just my voice, and yet it can be directed toward the highest of purpose in what it is that is vibrating and moving through it. And so we can resonate with God, whatever it is that we're expressing. We can be affirming what is true and what is good and is beautiful, or we can be basically emitting things that are similar to fingernails scratching on a blackboard, depending on what it is you choose to have pass through the instrument that you are and that God has placed you here to be. And so, there is a continual communication that goes on all levels all the time. In fact, back in the 1970s, there was a study done about sound, the effect of sound on plants. And what they did was they took two sets of plants, and one group was subjected to, they put the plants around a radio, and the radio was tuned into a station that had hard rock. So I had all these plants around it, and then they had another set of plants that were put around a radio that was tuned in and playing. It was tuned into a classical station that had classical and religious tunes being shared. And so the plants that were surrounding, after a period of time, the hard rock music actually leaned away from the radio, okay? They grew away from the radio. And I'm not judging hard rock. I'm just saying this was a study that was done, and the plants didn't care for it. And they measured that they moved away, some at an 80-degree, almost a 90-degree angle. They were trying to get away from the vibrations of these sounds. And the root structures of these plants were shallower, and the roots also grew away. The roots didn't grow towards at all. All of it were away. And they also had flowers, petunias there, and the petunias refused to bloom. And so then the other plants that were surrounding the classical and religious music coming out of that radio had a marked difference. Basically, the squash vines wrapped themselves around the radio, okay, hugging the radio from this classical and more beautiful music. And the roots were strong and healthy, and the plants were healthy, and the petunias were blooming. So it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it kind of gives you an insight as to vibration having an impact even on plant life, and what is more pleasant and appealing and harmonious even to the physical being of a plant would have something to do with us as well. And yet it's interesting, some of the decisions of what vibrations we today may be drawn to, and the impact they could be having, really. So there's a lot of biblical support also, a wealth of biblical support about the power of the spoken word. And we can start with really the beginning of the Bible itself and the book of Genesis and the first words that are listed there in the Bible, where it says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the water." How was God moving over the face of the earth, of the water, rather? Really, the next statement says and tells you, "And God said." That's how he was moving across that void, if you will. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God said, and God said, and God said, "Let there be a firmament." There was a series of things that God spoke and decreed into being. As we understand it literally from the passage. And so it basically is telling us that God spoke into being all these things, and the way that he did it was simply the affirmative decree. And actually, all of creation is done that way, and for us too, you know, always with thought. A thought or word precedes the manifestation of what it is that we're creating in our experience, our circumstances, and our reality. And out of the invisible thought realm, which we could say is the void, we think and speak into reality our experience. There are other passages in Proverbs. Proverbs is known as wisdom literature, one of the books of wisdom literature, and we already spoke to the one in Proverbs where it says death and life are in the power of the tongue. But there's also another that says, and this is Proverbs 12, "From the fruit of his words a man is satisfied with good." In Proverbs 13, "He who guards his mouth preserves his life with his wife." I added that. I wanted to see if you were listening. So it goes, "He who guards his mouth preserves his life." Okay. So guard your mouth wherever you may be, okay? And the last Proverbs I'll share with you is, "The mind of the wise makes his speech judicious and adds persuasiveness to his lips. Pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body." Get that? Even the prophets of the Old Testament got into it, and they had to have a word in there about the power of your word and the power of spoken word. The prophet Isaiah had this to say. He said, "So shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void." In other words, I'm creating with that. He said, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereunto I send it. So it means it's going to blossom and grow and produce according to the manner in which I direct it, positively or negatively. Okay? The prophet Jeremiah said it very succinctly. He said, the burden is every man's own word. That's your burden. What's the word that's moving through you? Silently in your own inner conversations, and then actually into the vibration of sound. The walls of Jericho is a powerful story about sound, and just very quickly, the walls of Jericho, if you know, came tumbling down. If you read the story in the Old Testament, Jericho was a walled city. It was the first obstacle that the Hebrews encountered once they entered Canaan, and the Hebrews had no implements for war. And so Joshua, who was their leader, guided them by instructing them to circle the city once each day for 6 days. And then he instructed 7 priests, and they were given trumpets made from ram's horns. And they were to walk around the city 7 times. And on the 7th time, the priests were to blow their horns. And so the people who were surrounded the city were to give a great shout at the same time that the priests sounded their horns. And all this vibration would cause the walls to come tumbling down. So they all did as they were instructed, and the walls came tumbling down. Whether you believe that happened or not is immaterial. If you really get that, it has a deeper symbolic spiritual meaning. And that is that basically the idea that we all have walls that stand between us and our good. And through the creative use of sound and affirmation, rightly used and applied and channeled, one can push through the barriers that one faces. But you need to formulate and not only think, but even express and affirm what is the truth, as it's another level of vibration. In the New Testament, there are many references, again, that speak to the power of the spoken word. And just to hit on a few, in the Gospel of John, the very first chapter, it will remind you of what's stated in the beginning of the book of Genesis, and that is, in the Gospel of John, it says, in the beginning was the Word, okay? And it continues, and it says, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made through Him, the Word, and without Him, the Word, was not anything that was made. Was not anything made that was made. So basically what it's saying is now we have the pure Word of God being spoken again. It was spoken in creative process in Genesis, and now it's telling us that you and I are creative, and it's coming through the purity of Jesus Christ, okay? And He is modeling this dynamic. And it states in that passage, in Him, meaning the Word, was life, and the life was the light of men. And that means that as you affirm the right words of truth, just as Jesus taught, you become a light, and the life of the divine begins to move through you. Jesus told us, if you recall, He said, these words that I speak, they're not mine. I don't own them, they're coming through me, okay? And He also understood the power of the word, and it's why He said, if you recall, abide in my words. Abide and live in these words of truth. Let them become owned by you, identified by you. And Jesus also said, and this is in the Gospel of Matthew, where He said, every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof. And He followed that with saying, for by your words you shall be justified, and by your words you shall be condemned. It's back to the idea again, we can't really think that God punishes us. We don't believe in a punishing God here. We punish ourselves because we misapply the spiritual laws through thought and word and deed. Okay? And that's what He's saying there. For by your words, by your thoughts, by your deeds, you will be justified or you'll be condemned. You create your own reality and your own experience by the choices we make on a continual basis. It's not being done to us by some presence in God that was, is punishing us. God is only love, now, always, and forever. Jesus, when He was tempted in the wilderness, if you recall, He said, it is written, a man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. What He was saying is, if you want to be fed then you'll be fed by the word of truth, the word of God coming off your lips, okay, and off your tongue. That in itself carries a vibration that will feed you and nourish you as a being. And he said, followed that up and said, the words that I have spoken to you, they are spirit and they are life. Okay. The founders of Unity, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, they had healings, both of them, physical healings. And the method that they used was the power of the spoken word, affirmations, affirmative prayer, and applying that. Joseph Murphy, who was one of the great metaphysicians, one of his famous books was The Power of the Subconscious Mind. He has since passed on, of course, but he was a great teacher and author. And he tells that one of his great teachers was Dr. Frederick Bales in Los Angeles, and he was also an author. And Dr. Bales had a friend of his, and his friend used to say to him, Bales, all members of my family passed on when they reached 72. I'll be 72 next year, and that's it. That's it. And Dr. Bales told his friend that there was a danger in making that statement and believing that and feeding his subconscious with that. But he didn't pay any attention, and so, he just made it a habit, really, of telling people that he was going to be 72 and believing it, and that was it. And the reason he tells this story is because on this gentleman's 72nd birthday, he died suddenly just as he was walking down the street, okay? So we can declare and decree what will become our reality. There's a story that I like to tell that is from a book written by Stella Terrell Mann. And it was an old book, and it's out of print by now, but the book title was The Power of the Spoken Word. And there was a wonderful story in there about a true story about a man that Stella Terrell Mann had counseled. And he was a man who had studied the Bible and studied truth principles, and he knew them all pretty well, and he had become very successful. And he made a lot of money. He had many financial interests and business interests. And as these things grew, it began to demand more of his time. And so he began to drift away from the principles that he had once really known. And so now he became more and more worried about all the things that he had amassed. He became worried about losing it. So he was worried and fearful about world affairs and things that were happening in business and unfair taxes and certain people in government he really didn't like, and he was angry. So there's a lot of things going through him. And the statement that he said over and over that people came to hear him speak was, the world is going plumb to the dogs. The world is going plumb to the dogs. Everything is going to the dogs. And he would speak it with such full force and anger and frustration and fear that he had developed in him, where once he had, seen kind of a different perspective, where he saw the good and the beautiful and the true, he'd all shifted around, the fear of losing what he had. And so daily he was saying that. Everything's going to the dogs. Well, one day, Stella Terrell Mann says, this man was on a business trip, and he took a wrong turn down a road. And as he went down this road, it narrowed really fast, and so he kept going and got narrower and narrower. He couldn't turn around. And all of a sudden, oddly enough, his car stopped and stalled. And so he got out of the car and lifted the hood to look and see what happened, and he heard dogs barking. Lots of dogs barking, and they were coming closer. And so instinctively, he just got back in his car. And there was this pack of dogs that descended upon his car and were, gnarling and growling and scratching at the window in the car. And more dogs came, and they were all around him. And he began to pray. And after a substantial period of time, it took a long time. He had to sit there before the dogs finally wandered off. And he got out, got his car, somehow he did something and got it going again, and found a place where he could, turn around in this very, very narrow road and get back onto the main drag, and got out of that. But later the man reflected on the incident, and he realized, he got aware that, wow, he had so often said, everything is going to the dogs, that it actually had included himself, and even this car he was driving went to the dogs, got all scratched up. But the interesting thing is, you know, some of you would say, oh, that's really weird and stuff. But let me tell you, many a person's gone through an experience and they're totally unconscious and asleep to what message may be in it. You get what I'm saying? So this man knew enough that he heard himself saying, the world is going to the dogs. Well, everything's going to the dogs. And the universe reflected and mirrored back to him as a lesson, as a teaching. Get it? The next thing is you get hit over the head with a 2x4. You know, will you listen? The universe is grabbing you and shaking you, in a sense, in many ways. Sometimes we are getting messages and we don't listen, and this man did. And so thoughts and words carve out our destiny. Even the narrowness of the road he was on, the universe was saying, do you realize how narrow your life is becoming and has become? Very, very narrow and limited. And so you need to get back on the wide road again. And so everything is an affirmation. One of the things I want to leave with you is that there is a teaching that I received from an older minister when I was a young minister, and his name was Charles Roth. He also was a writer, and he had a technique called tabbing. And the key word here is tab, and it means, it stood for TAB, totally accept the belief. So he said, whatever it is that you're up against in life, whatever you face, whatever doubt, fear, limitation that you face, determine what it is and then tab it good. So if you have lost your job, he would say, you are to say, I totally accept the belief that God will lead me to my right and perfect place of new employment. If you had a healing need, he would say, tab it. Tab it by saying, I totally accept the belief that God is healing me now. Tab it, tab it. We are practicing Genesis all the time by affirming what it is we want to create in our life. Let there be, let there be, let there be. Let there be healing, let there be prosperity, let there be love moving through me. Create some affirmations that fit for you. Take them home, write them down, read them every morning for 5 or 10 minutes, and consider that you are in the process of speaking up, not louder, but up in consciousness and purifying the dynamic. You shall decree a thing, and it shall be established unto you. Determine what you want to decree, who you want to be, how you want your life to be, and how you want God to move through you through the vibrations of not only thought, but of sound, the vibrations and the frequencies, that love and peace and joy and goodness flow off your tongue. And truly, you shall declare the goodness of God. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. At Unity, we believe that God's presence of love and goodness is everywhere, and that life is meant to be good. You can find out more about Unity and our teachings at unityhouston.org.
Are you currently church shopping, looking for that right church for you or your family? Perhaps you've been looking and been turned off by organized religion. It happens. Let me suggest you try Unity Church. We are a positive, practical, progressive approach to Christianity. Many who have found us have said, I didn't know there was a church that taught what I always believed. Let's be honest, people shop for clothes, good restaurants, and the right church that feeds them spiritually. If you're seeking a spiritual truth beyond tradition, try Unity Church. Come join us.